It's really important to learn how to tell our stories well because it comes up in things like job interviews or just meeting people for the first time. And if we can tell it really well, it's more interesting to the other person and it helps us more, and we can take kind of control of situations where we could otherwise feel helpless. So let's dig into it. I'm going to break this down into 3 different steps, and I'm going to focus on job interviews because that's kind of a prototypical way when we are asked to tell our story and tell our career story. But you could use this in a social situation when you're talking about how you arrived at an event. It doesn't really matter what the story is, it matters how you tell it. The analogy I really like to use is to think about a hiking path. Think about a path that goes back and forth up a mountain and switches back over and over and over again. There are straight parts and then there are turns. And what I want to differentiate is between what is the straight part of your career that you're going to talk about, which is the day-to-day of what you did on a job. That's the straight path. And then the turns are when you made a decision to change something in your career. So you chose to go to a certain college, or you chose to have a certain major, or to change teams or change companies. Those are the decision points, and those are the turns in the path. The problem that a lot of us run into is we tend to talk a lot about what happened on the job and along that straight path. And we don't talk enough about the decision points that got us from one point to the next point. What makes us all unique is the reasons why we move from one place to another. There might have been a lot of people that have been a product person at a certain company, but what makes you unique is why you chose one decision over next, why you went to that college, why you chose that major, why you chose that job, that team, that boss. That's the important parts, and we want to focus more on those decision points. If we're talking about a job interview, the first thing to do is to establish what your path is, and the second part is to establish which are the turns, what are the decision points. Now, the key is not only to talk about the decision points, but to talk about them in a way that it makes the story sound like you took all these paths, you took all these turns, and you landed at the top of the mountain, which is right here, right now, in this interview, to talk to you for this position. So all those turns were just leading you to today. So the last part, and perhaps the most important, is to curve your story to really fit the listener, to fit your audience. And the way to do that is to really think about what is important to them, like what are the things that they're looking for, and how can I talk about the parts of my decisions that make it sound like the path led to them. It's important to remember that it's not necessary to talk about every turn in your path or every little stop along your journey. What you really want to do is cherry pick the ones that are useful for that specific audience, for that specific listener. I'll give you an example from my own personal career history. So if I was talking to somebody and it was a technical interview and they wanted to know about my technical background, I would talk to them about how I did computer engineering at Rice University, and that engineering was something I knew I wanted to get into when I came out of high school. And then after that, I went to the most technical team that I could in Microsoft, which was my first job out of college. And I would talk about how I was, a technical program manager, and I was dealing with Windows security and the little technical parts of that. Now, that's one way to tell that first part of my career journey. If I was talking to somebody who was more interested in me being on like a salesy side, I might talk about how I chose product management over, a development job at Microsoft because I wanted to be more front-facing. And part of my job at Microsoft was to go and talk to people at Dell and AOL and all these other companies, and I was kind of the front face of the team. Now, both of these stories are absolutely true, but I'm choosing to pick different parts of it depending on who I'm talking to. For me, it's important to remember that this is my story, and I've told it 1,000 times in different situations, social, professional, and for me, the key is to be able to flex it and bend it and twist it according to whatever the situation is. And in that way, I don't have to lie or curb the truth. I just choose what is most relevant to my listening audience, and I speak to that. Once we get into the habit of telling our story in different ways, we can start to figure out, okay, can I tell a 15-second version of it? Can I tell a 30-second version of it? How much can I pay attention to the person I'm talking to and realize, oh, hey, they're really interested in that part I said about talking to other companies and being a front face, so I dig in more there. If we can tell a story that's 15 seconds long or 2 to 3 minutes long, now we have the flexibility to really kind of mold things and adapt to the situation. Once you get to the 2 to 3 minute range, you really don't want to go beyond that, because instead what you want to do is pay attention to the points that they're interested in and focus on them. 3 minutes is really too long for any sort of dialogue that's a monologue. If you're on the phone, it's really important to check in every so often and make sure the other person is catching it. So you might say, I went to Microsoft and I was living in Seattle. Have you ever been to Seattle? and you kind of check in and draw them back into the story as you're going along so that you make sure that you're not losing them. I'll give you another example from my current job, which is I have a company called The Run Experience, and we're a digital training platform for runners. And so if I'm speaking to somebody who is a runner or is in the athletic fitness industry, I'll talk to them about my athletic background. I'll say, you know, I was a Division I runner at Rice University, and I ran outside of college, and I've done marathons and all that stuff. But if I'm talking to somebody who's more interested in the business side of our company, I might speak more to our marketing strategy and talk about how, you know, we've learned a lot around Facebook ads and what type of content really draws people in and what kind of audience we want to attract. And I'll speak specifically to the parts of my job that are focused on the business end of our company. It's important to realize that if you are going to talk about something on the narrow path, on the straight part of the path, and talk about a specific skill set, it's better to focus on an anecdote or specific story that has a timeline to it than to talk in generalizations. So I might talk about how we're adapting our Facebook strategy to the changes on the platform and what happened last week in the Facebook news, as opposed to talking about like generalizations about how we advertise. One of the things that is really powerful about being able to tell your story well is that you can direct the conversation to where you're strong. So if you're in an interview and they're asking you question after question, you're kind of at the mercy of like, you know, whatever they want to direct the conversation. But if you can entertain and inform them about all the things that they need to know about you by really sculpting your story, it helps them, they're relaxed, and you'll do better in the interview because you're talking about things where you are in control. The last little bonus tip I really like is thinking about code language. Every group has its own type of terminology and code language. You don't want to use internal language to the company because that'll make you sound weird because you're not in the company, but there's industry common language. And the way to learn this is the first time you interview with somebody, listen to the language they use, listen to the words they use and how did they describe their company, ask them about what is important to the company, what kind of their priorities are, and listen to the specific words they use. Then in subsequent interviews with other people, mimic that language because it'll make you sound like you're an insider, like you understand the industry, and subconsciously they'll feel like you're one of the team. And really guide it in a way that is helpful for the conversation. Helpful. It's first step up. What a long day. And the way that I believe is the most effective way to do that, and I'm gonna just keep doing this and hope that the words come out of my mouth. If you want to tell something about very specific about a specific, I'm actually working with a company right now. Oh, nope. Oh, I gotta sneeze. Woo! Yeah. If this was helpful and it taught you a little bit more about interviewing and tell your story personally and professionally, I'd love to know. Hit the like button. Let me know if you have any questions or suggestions about videos I should cover. Let me know in the comment section. And of course, please subscribe to my channel. I'm coming at you with videos every single week. I will see you in the next one.